All right, everybody, thank you so much for joining me today. Marianne, I want to start with you because everybody knows you as our incredible Jefferson County Park Ranger from Colorado, but I want to tell everybody at home actually about your life before becoming a park ranger because it is fascinating. So Marianne, take it away.
Well, I think the important thing is the origin story of this park ranger has a lot to do with this guy right here. Growing up with an older brother, soon to be rocket scientist, is not the safest place to grow up, but it is a very inspiring and creatively wonderful place to be, and where one can become a park ranger or any scientist they want to become.
Wow.
I just credit my brother with that.
That is amazing. Well, okay, so before you were a park ranger, tell us about the other amazing, cool jobs that you had.
Golly, I think the highlights are I was a marine biologist. I worked on Catalina Island. I always wanted to be a marine biologist, and even when my brother and I were messing around doing things, I would go get pond samples from the park. And then after being a marine biologist, I was a naturalist. I've been an artist for hire. I do three-dimensional sculptures for museums and aquaria, and I've been a ranger for a really long time. I think, again, thanks to my brother's scientific inspiration, I just knew I wanted to combine the arts and sciences and find something to do.
Amazing. Well, we have two brilliant minds right here, so I feel very lucky to be able to sit down with both of you. And John, I have to tell you, we found out that you were a rocket scientist totally by coincidence. We were with Marianne and she kind of let it slip, and we immediately were like, we need to sit down and have a beer with this guy, which is why we are here at Launchpad today, which is so apropos because, you know, we're talking space. Marianne loved the jacket. I'm in my space suit, as you all can see right now too, so very cool. Okay guys, so being here at Launchpad, we of course can't be here without having some beer.
Oh,
Yeah,
excellent.
Thank you,
Thanks,
John.
man. You're very welcome.
Amazing. Oh my
All right.
goodness. Well, before we go any further, cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Thanks for
Yes.
sitting down with me to have a beer. Everyone
All right.
try theirs. Ooh.
That's
Launchpad.
nice.
Yeah.
Love that.
That's I'm go for blast off. Okay. So John, can you tell us more about what you do? We've heard rocket scientist, but
Sure.
get specific with us.
Sure. So I'm a project physicist at the University of California at Berkeley.
Okay.
Been there now for almost 20 years, or more than 20 years. And basically what I do is I study the phenomena out in space that lead to things like the northern lights, the radiation belts around the Earth. I've got missions that have been in orbit around the Earth now for almost 15 years. There were 5 satellites. It was the first project I worked on. It was a real trial by fire. 2 of those satellites are now in orbit around the moon.
Wow.
And then the most recent project that I've been working on, Parker Solar Probe, it's been in orbit about the sun now for 4 years.
Wow.
And it's the man-made object that goes closest to the sun. It's well inside the orbit of Mercury. It's going 145 kilometers per second.
Wow.
So that's over 5 times the orbital velocity of the Earth. And when it goes in close, and basically we're plunging in, hiding behind a heat shield and measuring where this wind of charged particles that comes off of the sun, where it originates, how it gets accelerated.
Oh,
It's
wow.
absolutely fascinating. It's, you know, I'm one of many people involved in these bigger projects, but they've all been, it's really amazing to be able to, like, as they say, touch the sun, but in California we say touch the sun appropriately and with consent.
Of course, yes. Consent is very important when it comes to touching the sun.
Absolutely.
It's incredible.
There's a lot of other people that they're like, well, we're kissing the sun. I'm like, no, that's not what we're doing.
Crossing the line, yeah.
We're crossing the line.
I love that. So actually, a lot of your accomplishments are right here on Marianne's jacket, right?
Oh, it is true.
Yeah.
So,
Describe
you know,
this for me. This is so cool.
well, so, you know, like many things, we like to have memorabilia
Yeah.
and swag that we can share with folks. And, you know, one of the things that I've been able to do is share, you know, high points of doing rocket science or doing science with rockets
Yeah.
with my family. So Themis was the first mission that I did hardware on.
Amazing.
There was another one called Radiation Belt Storm Probe, which was then changed to the Van Allen probes, Parker Solar Probe, and then there were other things that I put in. This is the Apollo-Soyuz mission from the the mid 70s, which was a real, you know, I grew up at the tail end of the Apollo era,
Okay.
and so things like Apollo 17, Skylab, Apollo-Soyuz, those were these huge milestones of like, look at this amazing stuff that people are doing in space. And you couple that with like reruns of Star Trek, and you're like, I'm going to do that. That's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, so there's a variety of different things. With the suborbital program, one of the places that we go is interior Alaska. We launch to the north from there.
Wow.
It's easy. You go to these like fairly Arctic places because you're closer to where the aurora happens.
Sure.
It's easier to get over it, to get through it, to then measure what's going on.
That makes sense. Oh my goodness. So, I mean, Marianne, you're wearing this jacket very proudly. You're obviously pretty proud of your brother's accomplishments?
100%. I absolutely love, again, the influence he's had and also just how inspiring he is. And now that he's a project lead, he really inspires a lot of other people to do amazing things too.
Yes. Well, a journalist, a park ranger, and a rocket scientist all walk into a bar, and this is what ends up happening. So cheers again. Love
Absolutely.
this. Love this collaboration. So I would love to hear more about what it was like growing up for you two, because obviously you're both brilliant. You have brilliant minds here. I was saying earlier, my brother and I would bite and kick each other as kids when we were, mad at each other. Things have got to be a little bit different in your household, right?
Not at all.
Let me just elaborate on the unsafe part that I was referring to earlier.
Yeah.
I think there was a lot of aftermarket manufacturing that happened, modifications. John was an Estes rocket kid, but it was always like, this is supposed to have this engine, but let's try this engine instead, or let's change this fin, or let's take apart the clock radio and see if we can make a robot. Come downstairs and see my latest project.
Let's tape this firework onto that firework.
Wow.
Yeah.
That sounds fun. Okay.
Oh yeah.
So everything was about taking things apart, understanding how they work, putting things back together, mixing Tinker Toys, Erector
Toy,
set,
Legos.
Lincoln Logs, Legos. It was all mixed with the taken apart alarm clock and turned into something new.
Wow.
And it was always cool, and it was always, hey, we made this thing, we're gonna go call the fish in the neighbor's yard, come. And I would just be the little sister going, okay, this is great, I got invited to go. And so it was really, I think, an incredible environment to grow up in, but it was also a little sketchy.
Right, but I think that, what was neat is you were always ready, so I remember vividly talking, just sort of making stuff up about electronics,
Okay.
and being able to talk with my sister about it. We were on Christmas break or whatever,
Yeah.
and we were just like going like, what if we could do this, and it could be like this, and she was like, yeah, and then it could be like this. So
Yes.
we were both had a strong sense of imagination, coupled to creative stuff that we where we could see the possibilities in this and that and the other, and kind of put things together. A big thing that we did in our neighborhood is we would have these sort of neighborhood dramas where, remember one in particular where we played Plane Crash.
Oh.
Okay, so it was like the 70s, so there's all these disaster movies about stuff.
Right.
And so we'd sort of set up some things where it was like one of those big wooden spools for cable, and people were sitting in the front, and somebody had like a captain hat, and then people were lined up on chairs with their stuffed animals as children, and then we're like, okay, well, we're going in, and everyone like throws themselves out of the chair.
Wow.
And so the neighborhood was full of kids that ended up doing all sorts of different things, but we had sort of a shared imaginative space that we would go at when we were preteens and little kids, and just go at it for hours on Saturdays and Sundays.
Man, don't you wish more kids were like that? Come on, get off those iPhones and iPads and get out there, be imaginative.
Well, I think it was a great deal of fun, and obviously I look back on it with great fondness.
Yeah.
There is funny things about the roles that people were playing. It was obvious that the big sister would, the big brother would be the captain, the big sister would be the lead stewardess, and then
Sure,
there were
of course, yeah.
So
I was always getting payload.
payload.
I was in charge of payload. I'd deliver a grasshopper or something.
Right.
Here we go.
Right. And so it was,
I love it.
but it was, once my sister and I got to high school, sort of recognized, you come out of the fog of being a teenager where you can barely think about yourself, right?
Right.
And you realize that your sister has all of these like amazing creative skills, and you're like, wow, this is gonna be cool.
And she's taller than me.
And she's taller than me.
She's got a little leg up there.
Yeah, she does.
That is so cool. Well, and it's really nice to be able to hear that from a young age you guys were both so supportive and collaborative with each other. I think that that's huge when it comes to development and where you guys obviously are at this point too. John, I have to say, okay, so you have 403 publications, right? Unless you've published something else since I read that.
Something like that,
Wouldn't
yeah.
be surprising. So obviously you kind of know what you're talking about here. What has been, would you say, the biggest accomplishment or discovery that you've had in your career, like kind of top for you?
So, I will say, so those aren't all my publications.
Sure.
They're, I'm second author on most of those.
Okay.
I like to think of myself as the best second author you're ever going to find.
Okay.
Just because I take a lot of care in both the science and the presentation.
Yes.
And so, that ends up turning into a lot of collaborators all over the world.
Okay.
And so, in some sense, developing that network and having those relationships, that's been the best thing.
Oh, yeah.
But I think that the paper that in the research that I'm most fond of is probably the work that I did as a postdoc. I spent 2 years working at Los Alamos.
Okay.
And I was studying these faint auroral arcs that appear way, way, way up near the North Magnetic Pole. And it turns out that those are a manifestation of basically things reaching in from far out in the magnetosphere, far out in the Earth's magnetic field, and then having an influence deep down in a very isolated and easy to understand way. And so for me, it was a chance to go from looking at these sort of microscopic processes that I did in graduate school and sort of branch out and say, well, what's the context? How do these hook into this bigger system? And it was great fun. And it was exactly, a lot of people, when they get their PhD or whatever, they may stay in the same track for the whole time. And I didn't really get that opportunity. I was told, we don't do that kind of microphysics, we do this macrophysics. And I'm like, okay, so I'm gonna learn how to do the macrophysics too. And it's gonna be a new thing to learn. It's gonna be stressful, but you get to the end of it and you're like, okay, now I have this in addition to that.
Wow. Wow, that is amazing. That's so unbelievable. Okay, so I have to ask Marianne, what is probably the biggest question that you have for your brother regularly? Like something that you always ask him when it comes to his work?
His work is so awe-inspiring that sometimes I don't even know what question to ask.
Yeah.
I mean, the man has things in space that he has engineered. And so sometimes I think it's more just not a question, but rather just a gratitude of all the time we spent at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science, at the planetarium, all the time we spent at star parties, all the time we spent taking things apart. It's less about questions and more just about this man is so important and been so wonderful to me as just letting that little sister tag along and try, to reach that level of ingenuity is meaningful. But oftentimes when we're out and about, John's a physicist and I'm more of a naked eye astronomer, and we kind of play off of each other.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, John, do you have questions that you ask Marianne about what she does? I mean,
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
So I refer to her, my mother, and a couple other friends as my ornithological brain trust.
Okay.
And so there'll be some interesting looking bird nesting up in the top of a snag tree across from our house, and so I'll get a picture and I'll send it to the brain trust and like, this looks like a kite, and they'll be like, oh yes, definitely a kite. Or have you seen this? And they're like, oh yeah, that's this. So again, it's the relationships, like having cool and interesting people, especially if they're your sister. The other thing that we do, because of where we are in our careers, we manage a lot of people. And so the opportunity to sort of exchange, to gripe about people like, oh, that person or that person, but also to sort of talk about tactics and strategies. How do you manage up? How do you manage down? Because those are two, you're never only managing down.
Right.
You've got to, understand where you live, how to manipulate the people that are giving you problems from above, how to get people to do it from below. And that's, again, part of, I never expected to be doing things like that. I was like, I'm going to be a scientist. and it's going to be this,
Yeah.
and that's not what it's been at all.
It seems
So-
like it's been so much more, which is so great. Well, guys, for the last question here that I have for you both, I mean, everybody says, you know, oh, your parents must be so proud, your mom must be so proud. Your mom honestly must be so proud to have just, you guys are both so brilliant, but to have that relationship where you guys are both so close has got to mean so much for her. You know, what does your mom say? I mean, is she pretty stoked on you guys?
I think all of our collective parents, I mean, my mom's really the only one who's still here, and she was a biology teacher, and so we are her absolute dream come true.
Totally.
This is what children should be. And so I think that's true. But Dad was a marketing analyst, numbers guy. He was always crunching numbers, could do it without a calculator. Wow. It was amazing. So we're sort of, and then my grandfather was a conservation biologist. You know, there's photos of him out in the field building habitat for waterfowl. Wow. So I think it's just, I feel like, again, and this is where, as we become more sort of in administrative roles, that importance of keeping the science and the things John does to keep his hands on science, and for me to make sure I don't lose track of the passion that art and science gives us. But our parents, collectively, our grandparents, their souls are just shining, especially this guy. It's just unbelievable what he does. I'm in awe every single day.
Well, we're all in awe of both of you. I seriously can't thank y'all enough for joining me here at Launchpad. So cheers again, and let's keep this going. Let's do this again, infinity and beyond, right?
All right, well
Thanks,
done.
guys.